Welcome to Two Women Chatting with Liz and Michelle. Enjoying life in our 50s, we're also empty nesters, looking to reinvent, reset, have fun, and talk about topics with experts and friends that affect us, our kids, and our families. So grab a cuppa and join us on the sofa for a chat. There's always room for one more. We're not tech savvy, but we do our best. But it's a learning curve. All bumps, clicks, and noises are our own. Come on in and have a seat.
Hi.
Hello.
So there's three of us here so far. You, me, and Maisie.
I think Maisie should be an honorary podcaster.
I think she should. She should even have her own microphone. Maybe a bit like Anthea's Soho.
True. Also, I think she should have her own Instagram account.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, because who doesn't want to follow a blind, toothless, dentally challenged,
listen, Maisie,
deaf dog?
Oh, she's deaf. That's right. Then, like, poor
Yeah.
thing. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. So,
well, this is an interesting one, isn't it? I think. Well, I say that about every episode, to be honest. But I think from a personal point of view, this really
it resonates. It's quite personal to my family, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to backtrack to what we're talking about today is ADHD and executive functioning. And I'd say there's probably a bit of a stigma still around some of those areas.
I think there is, and it's also, I don't think people really understand what it is. I think it's, well, I don't. Well, I didn't till recently. I'm looking forward to hearing Victoria talk about.
Yeah, so we've got a guest with us today called Victoria Bagnall. She is the co-founder and managing director of Connections in Mind. And they work with all kinds of neurodiverse disorders. But in particular, we wanted to talk to her today about executive functioning and ADHD. I don't know about you, but until maybe 18 months ago, I'd never heard of what executive functioning disorder was. Have you?
No.
No. Do you know now?
Well, I have, because I've been reading up on it, but no, it's quite scary that I didn't know what it meant.
It's quite scary that I think I probably got it.
No comment. But it highlights certain attributes. Is that a nice way of putting it in people?
Yeah, but what is interesting, and I think you found this a bit more than I did, because I was looking from a personal and family point of view, but there's a lot of positives as well. If you can channel your, let's call it a skill set. Yeah. It's not just a negative thing.
Oh, God, quite the opposite. It's just understanding perhaps of some of your limitations or skills and use them.
You need strategies, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's one thing.
It's really, the workarounds, but also recognizing, when somebody is suffering from, not suffering. When somebody has it.
I think it's managing, but I think, I hate to say that people do suffer because people don't understand. So people around you do not realise why you may do something or not do it.
For sure.
Which we won't go into about yours this time. But no, it's a serious subject, but I think we've got to also discuss, it's the positives. It really is. It shouldn't just be the negatives.
But also, I think, and we'll get on to this a little bit with Victoria, but what really interests me as a woman in her 50s now, and I've never been diagnosed with it, and I don't know whether I do have it or not, but what about, all of us in midlife who have managed to get through life, I don't know, just
got through it. Oops, I left my phone on, sorry.
Well, I'm here. How's your juicing diet going?
Oh, yeah. So, I did the juicing diet, and
you didn't cheat?
I didn't cheat for 2 2/3 days.
Is that actually a proper 2 2/3 days? Yeah. Until the evening, you mean?
No. So, the evening of Saturday, and I was by myself because James was away. And this is why I thought, I can definitely do 3 days of this juicing, and I can really commit to it. And I did. I promise I absolutely did. I exercised. I drank everything. I did all the things I'm supposed to do. And then by the time I got to Saturday night.
So you did so you thought 3 days, not say 3 nights.
Oh, no, 3 days.
Yeah.
3 days. And then I got to my very last green juice, which was kale, spinach, celery,
healthy stuff,
ginger, really healthy stuff. And I did put a slug of vodka in it.
You're kidding. Oh, brilliant. Oh, it doesn't taste, it's got no calories.
It's got hardly any calories, and it did make me chug that last one and keep...
Did you put an ice cube in it?
No, on the rocks.
Oh, that's brilliant.
A little juiced cocktail. No, so I did, and I lost 5.5 pounds by Sunday morning. So result, I think.
That was definitely a result.
So,
and it was enjoyable.
Yeah, I may not be in bikini territory yet.
Oh, who is?
But I could wear a swimsuit next week, I think, without, I don't know, going undercover or something.
Oh, I've got to go out at midnight now. Oh, don't worry about it.
I'll be swimming in the dark. No, so I was really pleased, and I did feel good for it. And I didn't actually feel terribly hungry. I had an almond or two if I needed to.
I thought you just say an arm.
Yeah, I did eat my own arm during the exercise. But no, I did eat a few almonds just so I could have the sense of chewing again, make sure my teeth hadn't retired.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It was good. Oh, so right, yes, subject. Probably we should
get back to it.
Yeah.
That's quite why the subject matter is.
Subject matter is
going off on a tangent.
Yes, exactly. I was going to tell you a story, but I've forgotten it. This is probably a good time for Victoria to join us.
Yeah.
So a warm welcome to Victoria Bagnall and her dog.
Sorry.
Is that your dog?
Yeah, it is my dog in the background. They never normally bark. Apologies.
That's okay. We love dogs on this programme, don't we? Because we've got Maisie, we've had Soho, Anthea Turner's dog. We might actually make it a guest feature.
Yes, yeah.
You can only come on if you've got a dog.
Yeah, that's a good idea. But anyway, so Victoria is the co-founder and managing director of Connections in Mind and is an expert in the field of executive functioning, which we'll talk about in a minute if you don't know what that is. And you've committed... That's whining. And you've committed your life to your soul work of raising up.
Sorry, shall I go and lock her up? Are you sure?
Oh, no, she's welcome. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So you've worked really hard to raise awareness about critical brain functions and how genetics and trauma can influence their development. And you're committed to creating a new social system in which everyone feels nurtured, supported, and valued so they can flourish. Sounds like a really good idea. So we wanted to talk to you today about executive functioning and ADHD. We both have sort of some personal experience of this, but also how it relates to women of midlife, say, because we're basically the missed generation, aren't we? We weren't around when people started talking about these neurodiverse disorders. So we've sort of skipped it all and just hobbled around, managed our lives and sort of got on with it. So there's a couple of honestly, I'm just really interested in hearing what you have to say about it.
And I'm interested in sharing it too. So yeah.
So what does it mean when you say when someone's neurodiverse? What's that mean exactly?
Yeah, so this is a term that's used quite regularly now, and it means a lot of different things to lots of different people. But I think from my perspective, basically what it means is that all brains are different, and that some have certain differences that make us kind of stand out a bit more in society. We're a bit less we're a bit more atypical maybe than your normal person. I use that in inverted commas. But when we're neurodiverse, our brains work a little bit differently to other people's. It doesn't mean that they're wrong, that there's kind of any deficit or there's a disorder in them, which is a lot of the terminology that used to be used around these challenges. But actually that we're just a little bit different and things work a little bit differently in our brains than they might do for other people. But what's interesting is that when one has an executive function approach, and we'll get onto that in a minute, it's about understanding it's all part of being a human being, and that just because we're neurodiverse doesn't mean we're any less human than everyone else. It's just part of being part of the human race. And just like there's all sorts of different hair colours and eye colours and skin colours, there's all sorts of different brains that we have as well.
So what's the difference then between executive functioning and ADHD, or are they just completely different?
No, it's completely the same. So executive functions are the brain processes. So what goes on in your brain that causes the traits of ADHD that we see. And so there is a very well-known Professor Russell Barkley, if anyone wants to look up his work, and he has dedicated his life to researching ADHD. And he has written numerous papers that say that for him, executive function disorder, and they call it disorder in the literature, which I hate, but anyway, that's what they call it. Executive function disorder and ADHD are interchangeable terms, that the executive functioning is what's going on when we struggle with our ADHD traits, the things that we find difficult when we have ADHD, like paying attention, organizing our belongings, managing our emotions, starting tasks, managing our time. All of that is to do with our executive functioning. It's all housed in our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain behind our forehead. Now, before 20 years ago, we didn't know what part of the brain was responsible for these traits because we weren't able to look inside of someone's living brain and see what was going on. But it's been the advent of fMRI scanners that have been able to look at the brain while we're doing these tasks. And people with ADHD or dyslexia or autism are underneath these scanners and be able to see what's going on for them. And we can clearly map that the executive functions are not as connected sometimes as they are in neurotypical brains. Now, that doesn't mean they're any better or worse. It just means that they're different. But that part of the brain maybe isn't working kind of optimally, and that can be because of genetics. Because we have family history of these things, or it can be because of trauma. And I can get on to talking more about the trauma piece if that's interesting for you guys in a bit. But there's been a lot of very recent research about the effect of trauma on our executive functioning and the effect of a lot of the symptoms of PTSD kind of co-occur with the ADHD symptoms. That's not saying that ADHD is caused by trauma. It's not what I'm saying at all, but often you can experience similar kind of symptoms or traits if you have experienced trauma in the past as well. So there's a lot of complexity there.
So are you saying you're born with it, or could it be triggered? So, for example, midlife women going through the menopause and our hormones are racing all over the place. Can it magnify the symptoms that we may have had all of our lives and we didn't realize? And when we're experiencing brain fog or reaching for words, as we talked about before we started recording, I'm terrible, and Liz is...
I'm getting better.
All right, Liz
not
is
that I'm speaking at all.
Liz is really good now. Anyway.
I'm not saying anything, that's why.
No, but could it be then that menopause puts a spotlight on some of these symptoms?
Absolutely. And so I think we found out about each other when I was talking about women and ADHD, and how actually what we know from the research now, the most recent research, is that the estrogen levels impact our executive functioning and our dopamine levels within our brain. So when we have high estrogen levels, so that's ovulation in our cycle, or when we're younger, we have these high estrogen levels, then that's kind of keeping our brains, our executive functions doing the work that they need to do. But when our estrogen levels drop, then that can have an impact on our ability to use our executive functions and the dopamine within our brain too. So it's very interesting that at the onset of menopause, that a lot of people are reporting these symptoms are kind of getting, or these traits are getting worse. And I use that again in inverted commas, but these things are getting more challenging for them, I think is the best way of putting it. And so, yes, so the trauma piece is all mixed up in there as well. So we mustn't forget that if you struggle with these things like punctuality and organizing thoughts in your head and organizing your belongings and so on and so forth, the feedback that you'll be getting from society for the whole of your life will be that you're not good enough, that other people find these things easy, that if you're so intelligent, why can't you just do this stuff? All this kind of really unhelpful comments that don't actually help you to develop these skills. And we might get detentions at school, or, if it gets escalated, it might be suspended from school and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of societal and systemic bias around these challenges in these areas that make them seem as if they're character traits and it's to do with your personality, but that's absolutely not true. It's not to do with your personality at all. It's to do with the way that your brain is wired and your executive functioning. And what's really interesting is the more stressed, tired, and if we haven't eaten well, and if we haven't connected with the people we care for and the people that we love and make us feel supported, then our executive functions work less as well, so they're less able to do the work that they need to do. Yes. So when we're living a stressful life, and then we're getting all this feedback from outside saying, oh, you were late for this appointment, you're clearly a bad person, that spiral of executive functioning goes down and down and down. And so the best remedy for having struggles with our executive function is wonderful, ladies. It is that we have to look after ourselves better, which involves doing things like yoga, having massages, and connecting with our friends. And that is the best remedy for these things. Isn't that wonderful?
That's what we've been talking about. It's connecting with people is the most important thing. I think that's where the problem with lockdown has caused so many issues and probably highlighted it a lot more.
Absolutely.
Do you know, I had not heard of executive functioning disorder.
I think it's a much better terminology, though.
Yeah, I do. Well, a friend of mine, I came back from the States having visited my daughter out there, and Flissy is a street smart, clever girl, but she is such a typical, when she was a kid, she lost every piece of uniform, never got her homework in, missed appointments, got worse when she moved out of home and went to university and had to struggle on her own. And it really made our relationship quite fraught. And all it was criticism on our part, nagging constantly. We never got off a phone call feeling great. We just felt like horrible, mean parents that were constantly nagging her. And I don't know if you realize this, but the reason I contacted you was because Flissy chatted to your colleague, Dr. Saracha Cashman, and she was diagnosed with executive functioning disorder. But what a light bulb moment that was for us as a family. Both, I felt relieved. I think she felt incredibly relieved that she could sort of label herself and realize, as you said, it's not a fault. It's not a weakness. It's just a way your brain works. But the back of that, the flip side of that is, gosh, I felt so guilty as a parent for the way that I have handled her through school and the first few years of her being away in university. I feel like a rubbish parent.
You mustn't. And we get this all the time from parents, and you mustn't. This is brand new neuroscience that we're finding out now. It's just not been around. Our society is set up the way it is because of years and years and years of things that are embedded. And the fact that we are now beginning to understand it is so wonderful, but there's no way that we can go back in time and change what has happened. We are part of the societies in which we've grown up at. All we can do now is work for a better future where people who are born with executive function challenges feel loved and supported from the day go, because then this spiral of weak executive functioning getting worse and worse won't perpetuate. And so I'm calling, as part of our work, for a real revolution in the way that schools are put together to have these relational approaches to behavior management, because a lot of this is like minor behavior misdemeanors, handing in work late, not meeting deadlines, being late for school, not having your school tie on, chewing gum in class, all that kind of stuff. It's all to do with your executive functions. The research clearly shows that punishing them, so giving someone a detention, doesn't suddenly allow them to develop this skill of being able to turn up on time, funnily enough. It just makes them feel a lot of shame. So I want to try and help develop schools throughout the UK and throughout the world that have this relational approach. And a lot of schools are doing it, especially those that work with kids with special educational needs and the pupil referral units and alternate provisions, the ones that are working with the really vulnerable children who have experienced that trauma when they were little and really need that support. But imagine an environment where you go into in school where you feel, no matter what your executive function challenges, you feel it's just another part of your learning journey. And just the same as if you struggle with being on time for things, you are just given more support to develop that skill rather than given a detention and made to feel like you're an outsider because you haven't got that ability to do that yet.
Yeah, that's where the teachers have to be educated. My daughter, you were saying about Fliss, it wasn't recognised till later. My daughter is severely dyslexic, so it was picked up early, but they still like to pigeonhole them and put them into so therefore she struggles on that without even looking at anything else, saying because she's dyslexic, she can't do this, this and this. And I think it's got to go, it's got to start at primary school.
Well, there's still a lot of stigma as well, isn't there? You think if your kid is diagnosed with ADHD, as you said, they'll be jumping off sofas, they'll be on Ritalin, they'll be on meds, they'll lose weight because they're on this,
But it's not, it's a mental, there's the physical and the mental side.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I didn't realise that. I mean, I really didn't. I won't go into great details about it, but it's frightening. But I think, I'm going to be honest, the schools that my daughter went to did not help. And she actually went on, I'm not going to talk about it, but went on to university and has tried to now, explain what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's never too late then, is it?
No.
Bringing it back to midlife or even in your 20s. And I think, a lot of this does come out in the wash, doesn't it? When you move away from home and you're dealing with job or college or something.
You can manage all the time you're at home because generally there might be a parent who's going to pick you up a bit and guide you, structure. The minute you leave home, that's when because they can't multitask.
But also when you become a mother, right? And I think this is really important. The society, ancient cultures had, you're raised by the village, right? You had mum and you had auntie and you had the, other members of the village around to help with everything about being a mother. But now you're just left on your own with this baby and not given, there's no instruction manual, and maybe mum comes, once or twice a week to help out or whatever it is if you're lucky. But actually, if you've got executive function challenges, managing having a baby on top of everything else is just so huge. And this is when the wheels can really come off for a lot of women because, again, your hormones are all over the place because of, as we know, when you have a baby, everything's up in the air. And so there's just so much around this area, but also, a lot of medical professionals aren't tuned in to the fact that, there is just as much ADHD or executive function challenges within women as there are within men, but just men manifest it more when they're younger because it's more socially acceptable for boys to run around all the time and then they get a diagnosis. Whereas with girls, they're much more attuned at masking because they are conditioned to be the good girl, to do everything, to have the neat book and all that kind of thing. And so there's all this masking that goes on. So there's just so much about this. So we find a lot of women getting, into that kind of motherhood stage. They really struggle. And then, when the kids are moving on to school and they're managing their careers, and there's just so much about all the juggle that we have to do that is just so demanding our executive functions. And this period we've just lived through with the COVID and everything changing all the time, you can't plan a thing, has been just this. That's why we've all got brain fog at the moment. That's why we've got this now, is because it's just too much for our brains to handle, whilst we're also super stressed because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
So here's another question. As you've been talking, I've been thinking, gosh, how lucky is our family that we were able to come to you and pay for a consultant and to chat about this. On the NHS in this country, it takes a while they're so overloaded because probably the pandemic has accelerated and just added to the workload of practitioners and so on. It's not really fair, is it, that people who have, perhaps a middle class background and upwards might be able to get diagnoses for their kids or their young adults. And then, others who are not in such a fortunate place, where do they go? What do they do?
I had this conversation with someone and they said, well, it's not life threatening.
Oh,
and I went, but it is.
So
it is. Because you don't realise that, that somebody could take their own life.
Exactly.
It could be life-threatening for a baby.
That's what I mean.
Exactly.
It's not, it's not like you've got cancer. I mean, it's not like cancer or you've broken your arm or something. But it is the same effect on.
It is.
My niece has just been diagnosed. That's how I'm very, very conscious. She lives in the Netherlands now, and she won't mind me talking about it. She's really struggled, and she just cannot finish a particular project at university.
Yeah.
And that's when they've discovered that's what the problem is.
Well, it's like you said earlier that Victoria. It's like you said earlier that these kids, when they're younger, they're labelled as messy, disorganised, cannot be relied on. And of course, that's going to feed into their ego and their confidence. How do they deal with that in their lives? That they've basically, from a young age, just been the naughty kid or the disorganised kid or, the one who's not going to be as successful. It's a rough label, isn't it?
It's horrible. And middle class kids get that. And kids that are on the low end of the income spectrum you're going to be in prison. And that's what they get. And that's really, really tough. And that's where they end up.
I'm not exactly sure what the figures are, but a disproportionate number of people in the criminal justice system have neurodiverse traits.
And it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And that's because our system is set up to penalise people who have executive function challenges. But the main injustice of this is that if you have grown up in a traumatic environment, and that can be having, abusive, psychological abuse, physical abuse, all sorts of things, which tends to happen not so much in your middle class families. It does tend to happen at the lower economic end of the spectrum, but of course can happen across all facets of society. But if you are already born into that, for no fault of your own, born into that kind of that socioeconomic status, you're much more likely to end up in the criminal justice system because of the trauma that you face. Nothing that you have done. There's no choice in the matter. And it's just so unfair. And I do believe if that people could just understand that these children, what they need more than anything is a feeling of love and support and belonging somewhere within their upbringing, and that no amount of punishment is going to help them get there. In fact, it's going to make it worse. And what we're doing is setting these children up from the moment they're born for failure. And those middle class children who have the loving, supporting families, but are still going into the school system and being told all of this, they're also having a really difficult time. And we get numerous children coming to us and young adults coming to us who have suicidal ideation. And it's all around their belief that they are not good enough because they struggle with their executive functions. And that's because they've been told that by society for their entire lives. And that's just not good enough. We need to do better for these young people. We have a mental health crisis in this country, and it stems from having a culture and society that values strong executive functions but doesn't invest in developing them in young people.
So let's look at the more positive side of that. So seriously, if executive function, would you say a lot of creative people have that? Right. So there's nuggets of really great stuff in there, and it's I guess channeling that and rewarding that aspect of their behavior. Then we could have, some inventors and creators.
You do.
And
I mean, a lot of famous sports people are, they whatever you like to call it now, but it was ADHD or ADD, or it keeps changing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot.
What didn't you
Michael
find in
Jordan,
your research about, like a leader in a sales force or something?
Yeah, and I had the same example in business I used to run. I had a fantastic salesperson, and we promoted him, and he did amazing. But he did need his handheld. But we reward. We rewarded well financially, but also he needed just to be told he was doing well. And he felt, if you didn't, then he was worried that he'd done something wrong.
The anxiety piece is huge.
Yeah, it wasn't handholding, but it was.
Well, it can be. It can be. And that's because when our metacognition, which is our self-awareness, is an executive function too. So if our executive functions are not working optimally because either of genetics or because of trauma or because we haven't slept well or because of so many factors that need to be right for our executive functions to work well, then metacognition is one of those. And so if he struggled with his metacognition, he's constantly looking for external reinforcement that he is doing well. And it happens a lot with the best people because they are so creative. Their brains are all over the place. They're thinking of all these innovative ideas and so on and so forth. But they do need that. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry. I'm laughing because we talked about this in a previous podcast that's coming up, actually, that Liz and I have different strengths. We both get to the same place. And I only have two speeds, and one is warp speed, and one is so slow I'll fall over myself.
Binary.
Yeah. And I think, Felicity, I know you'll be listening to this. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Doesn't. Exactly. And a lot of people come to us because, they see these traits in their children and they think, oh, hang on, that was me. Is there something that I could work on?
Like my sister's done the same with her daughter now. She's recognised, gosh, I used to daydream all the time as a child.
But that's exactly it, isn't it? We are that generation, and above us too, the ages above us, we missed all that diagnosis. So would you recommend, even in our 50s and midlife, do you still recommend trying to get, what can I call it? just going to somebody and talking
I guess it's
to them.
Do you call it being diagnosed?
Yeah, so I think a diagnosis can help. It really depends what you're wanting to do with the diagnosis. That is important as to whether you get it or not. You can self-diagnose if you're not planning on getting medication. You can just say, I identify as ADHD or autistic or dyslexic or whatever it is, and that should be enough for an employer if that's what you're trying to do with it. If you want to get a formal diagnosis for medication for ADHD, then you obviously have to go to a psychiatrist who's a prescriber, or a nurse practitioner for that matter who's a prescriber, to get that medication. But what we found is the most supportive, and we've got this lovely community of mostly women, there's some men as well in our community as well, called the Connected Club. It's a group of people who have executive function challenges, who meet once a week on a Thursday with Dr. Surecha Kachman, and they meet up and they just chat through their challenges and talk about what's going on. There's something so wonderful about sharing and knowing that you're not alone, and also that builds that connection, which is what we know we need in order for our executive functions to work optimally. We do also offer strategy sessions, and we have these little micro kind of modules of 6 minutes, 6 to 12 minutes, so you can learn about your brain and about the neuroscience, and we really break it down so it's really digestible. And we run masterclasses and webinars and things that people can join as well. So we've created this little online community of people, and that's can be just as helpful as coaching. One-to-one coaching that we offer as well is really, really helpful for people who are specifically working on a goal. Maybe they've got a project they're working on. Maybe they're looking to transition in their career. Maybe they're just trying to stay in their job. If they're working on that could be really helpful. But in terms of like long-term support, being part of our Connected Club has been literally life-changing for so many of the women and men in our community, because they've just got their people, people that get it and understand.
A tribe. Yeah. What's the website address for that?
So it's on our cimlearning.com website, the Connected Club. So you can look that up, or if anyone wants.
Is that free, or do you?
So there is a free membership, absolutely, and we also do have a paid for membership. Obviously, we have to cover the costs of the practitioners running these sessions and so on and so forth, and that's £25 a month. For the paid for membership. But also, if anyone, because we're committed for making sure equal access for everyone, for every paid for membership that gets purchased, we offer a free one to someone who can't afford it. So it's a buy one, get one free, a bit like Tom's shoes. You buy one and then we'll give one to someone who really needs it.
Yeah, I like that. So just to round this up, what would be your piece of advice that you would give anybody listening to this show and who thinks either they or their kids or their husband or, somebody close to them might have it? What's positive bit of advice that you might say to them as to how to handle them or what to do?
I think the most positive thing and the thing that has really kind of reassured me throughout all the research that I've been doing in this is that the key to developing strong executive functions is connection, and that comes from empathy. And so the best thing that we can do is to learn how to empathize properly with the people that we care for. And that is not about being sympathy. Oh, poor you, you struggle with this. That's not kind of looking down on people. It's about getting in the emotional pit with people who are struggling with these things and feeling what it feels like with them. So just really understanding it from their perspective. So if you can do that, that could build that connection, help them feel that they belong and that they understood, and that can help their executive functions to come back online. So it's free, but we just need to learn the skill of doing it. And that can be the most powerful thing. And the other thing, like I mentioned earlier, is that, it's all about the well-being piece as well. So, making sure you're doing exercise, making sure you're eating a healthy diet, making sure you're getting enough sleep, making sure that you are doing things that you find joyful. So mindfulness, yoga, playing sports, going for a walk in nature, all of those things that have been, everyone's been, it's a bit woo-woo. It's absolutely founded in neuroscience. This does really help and will help make you more productive and more able to engage in your life. So there's lots of wonderful positive things we can do, and they're good as well. Who doesn't want to go for a massage or go for meet up with your friends for a coffee? It's worth investing in ourselves and our executive functions.
Fantastic.
That's lovely to hear.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Victoria. That's just been eye-opening, really. And I'm just really glad we got an opportunity to talk with you. Thank you for being so helpful and open and giving us great advice.
That's my pleasure. And I think, together, the more people that learn about this, that we can change the world and we can make sure that future generations are supported and feel that they belong so that they can flourish and be the best that they can be.
That was really, really interesting. You would say you're not a bad parent, by the way.
Thank you.
No, seriously, you're not.
I felt really quite emotional actually during that when I thought that I can't tell you how, when I can stand back now and look at the way that Felicity was criticised and sort of labelled by all of us kind of laughingly, like, oh, Felicity won't turn up to Zoom, or, where's anybody heard from Felicity?
Yeah.
And now I look at her and I think how incredibly resilient she has turned out to be. And I'm really proud that despite having an executive functioning disorder, she's been really successful and she has managed.
She's found ways to cope.
Well, she's lived away from us now for 5 years since she went to university in the States. How the heck did she manage that? I mean, my wake up moment was when I literally opened her glove box in her car and there was probably 30 unpaid bills in there. Not even kidding.
But they just don't remember. It's not that she just put it away on the side. I have the same with my daughter. Emma, she's got much better because they find ways to function, to get around it, or to cope.
Yeah, coping strategies.
Coping, but there's only so much they can do. And so some of it, that's not priority to her paying a bill. Her priority is to just exist, to get on with life.
But also, when there's 10 bills, then it's overwhelming. Like, why would I even start? There's too much here to deal with. And maybe there's a little of that in me. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of scary to recognise that.
But then you can speak to Fliss and say, that's perhaps where some of it's coming from.
Yeah. Honestly, Felicity, when you listen to this, because I will make you listen to this because I need the download stats, but also... we're doing really well.
We're doing
on downloads,
very well, yeah.
But I am so proud of you for what you've done and what you've achieved and what I know that she's going to be successful in.
Yeah. So
isn't it funny how it's a lot of creative people, because Emma's really creative.
Yeah, very. But it's
Felicity's our creative one. I would say possibly I'm a little bit creative.
Oh, very creative. and technical as well. Yeah.
No, I'm rubbish. I'm not technical.
No, but you find a way around it. That's what's incredible, because, and that's what Emma does, she'll find a solution to something which I wouldn't bother with. I'd be like, because she's learned to do that. She didn't used to, but she's found a way of doing things. I think the same with you. I mean, I wouldn't know where to start with half this technical stuff. You do it, you find it.
Yeah, but it's somewhat exhausting because you know me, I'm like full on.
That's what I mean. You're focused on something. You focus, then you just drop off, so to speak.
And then
not there.
And that whole validation thing that you were saying about, if I don't get people, and it's really pathetic. It's like it's the actor ego in me. I always assumed, like, if I don't get people saying, "Oh, you did really great. That was a great podcast," or "Love what you did just then," then I feel like, what's the point? And I get all sort of mardy and like,
that's it. But this whole
and
point.
then I don't do anything.
Yeah, no, but doing a podcast, the fact we're actually doing a podcast for start is amazing, I think, and we keep going with it and we're enjoying it and it's going to be incredibly successful.
I love it. And what I really love about doing this is all the different subject areas we're dipping into. We're looking at health and well-being and mental health and like genuinely
emotional health as well.
Yeah, genuinely it's what interests the two of us and what really affects our kids, our families, our friends, that kind of thing. And it's been, I mean, we're not at the end of the season yet. We've still got some great guests still coming on with subjects that like,
and we keep thinking of them as we come across them, and we come across problems sometimes in our lives.
On the rare occasion that we do have a dinner party, because we're still getting back into the swing of things. But I feel like I've got more to talk about, actually.
Do you know, that's true, actually. Can sound quite intellectual sometimes as well.
I'm not always talking about my kids. That as
and you've got
proud as I am of all three of them, I've got, I can say, hey, did you know such and such? Or have you ever thought about so and so? And I feel like it's adding a bit of depth to me, perhaps.
It's expanding our horizons. Did I say that right now? Expanding our horizons.
You told me you were better and you
and our brain's gone now again.
And Liz has got a new mic.
I'm not using it.
Oh no, you're not. No, you were using it earlier, but she has got a new mic.
It's a nice shiny mic.
Oh, yes, that last podcast was a little, I mean, great subject matter with Anthea, that's for sure. But, and I love talking to her, but I don't do it deliberately. I just want you to know, people, I don't just turn me up high and Liz down low.
Yeah, that's what she says. In fact, I'm talking all the time, but I just can't get a word in edgeways.
I just put her on mute, to be honest. Anyway, that's all from us. Yeah. So goodbye and thanks for listening.
See you next time.
Actually, hold that thought. Late arrival from my daughter, Flissy. I wanted to share this with you because I contacted Flissy to let her know that I'd mentioned her on the podcast. I felt that was the very least I could do, really. And she offered her thoughts on how ADHD has affected her and just generally how she felt about it. So just going to leave you with this note to finish on. I have to say, I was really proud of her for doing this, and I hope maybe it helps somebody.
This is for anyone who has adult or child ADHD for that matter. I hope you know that you are not alone. ADHD is something I've dealt with my whole life, and it's manifested itself into different ways throughout different seasons. It's hard, then it's not. It's confusing and it's simple at the same time, and it's a constant changing battle of learning tools and how you apply them, and understanding that there's nothing wrong with you, but you do need patience with yourself. I definitely felt slower, or wondered why everyone else understood the instructions given on the first go, or wondered why I could never remember a to-do list or left the house with one sock on in a frantic hurry, or even emotional regulation and understanding that sometimes the reaction I want to give isn't the best one. It's just what my brain feeds me, sometimes unfairly. I am not embarrassed or ashamed to deal with this on a daily basis. It's frustrating beyond belief, yes, but I only get frustrated with my own brain for sometimes feeling like it gave me a setback or it's working against myself. The main thing to remember is there is nothing wrong with you. You are wired differently, yes, but different isn't bad. It just takes a little bit of extra love and care to figure out what works best for you. I also want to note that I've never ever felt pushed down or unsupported by friends or family. I'm sure family members of people like me who deal with this and other issues similar feel guilt for not knowing or not understanding what their family member's going through. I feel zero resentment, as I didn't even know what was going on with me. I still don't sometimes, but if I don't even understand my own brain, how could I expect someone else to? It's a tricky thing, feeling like your mind has it out for you, where it feels like that should be the one thing you can always rely on. But lean into that season of confusion or navigating what works for you, and know that what works for you might not work for someone else. But know that so many people, including myself, deal with this, and it's so thankfully more normalized now, and there are so many resources and books and ways to understand the brain. I'm a work in progress, and I hope I can one day be in a place where I have all of the right tips and tricks and things to say on dealing with it. But until then, I'm taking it one day at a time, and I hope you do too.
Thanks for listening to Two Women Chatting with our special guests. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to us if you left a rating and review. Even better, share with your friends. And please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. There's a link on our Instagram bio and Facebook pages.